let's play some more Disney Channel games. Tie-in video games. They're terrible, yet we love them. And if you aren't familiar with this channel, just know that I am a fan, a big fan. And again, some of the ones I played a lot were those that were based on some of my favorite shows at Disney. But the more you play these games and watch the shows, you can see a lot of differences between the two, which is why I've decided to play all the Disney Channel games I can. Wait, this always happens. Which is why I've decided to play all the Disney Channel video games I can, and see how accurate they are compared to their on-screen counterparts. We've actually done this in the past, so make sure you go check out that first video. And as always, thank you for watching, and make sure to like, subscribe, and consider becoming a member to support the channel, and to see my full gameplay of today's games. So when thinking about what to play today, something had dawned on me. In that original video I made, I kind of ignored the Disney Channel video games that are based on Disney Channel original movies. Though to be honest, there aren't too many, but one I already had in my collection, the Cheetah Girls. Oh, such a good movie. 'Cause we are sisters, we stick together. Sorry, you weren't meant to, see that. So yes, we will be playing the Cheetah Girls today, as well as a couple other Disney games that were based on popular Disney shows. And again, everything is going to be scored based on how accurate they are. Well, I guess they have to be a good game too in the end. But that criteria is how the characters look and act in the video game versus on screen. Is the storyline accurate to what was seen in the show or movie? Then we will give bonus points for any Easter eggs. And finally, we will give points for if it's a good game. And here are the standings from last time we did this, with Phineas and Ferb for the DS being our top contender with a score of 31. But now let's dive into the Cheetah Girls for the Game Boy Advance. Get this off my head. Now, obviously you can't have the Cheetah Girls without having those perfect Cheetah-licious members. I'm sorry I said that, but you'll see why in a second. But yes, we have Galleria, Chanel, Aqua, and Dorinda. And in this one, you'll play as the pixel art sprites of the characters, and then see pixelated, compressed versions of the real-life characters when there is dialogue on the screen. And as we've seen in the past, this is a pretty standard format for a lot of these tie-in games. So let's take a look at these sprites, shall we? I feel like I'm on board with them until you get to the face. What on earth is that? Like, I know there's only so much you can do with this amount of pixels, but as we'll see later on in this video, it's not impossible to add a little more detail to the face. But the outfits and fashion I think are spot on, and at times taken directly from the movie, though I'm not entirely sure why everyone's cheetah colors got swapped around for the game in comparison to that final scene of the movie. Like, Aqua is actually the only one that keeps that original outfit and color. And in terms of how they transferred each character's personality, I think they did a pretty good job. Galleria still has that big head of hers, Dorinda is still the main dancer, they give Chanel the fashion trait, and oh, Aqua. I feel like Aqua really gets shafted in both the movie and in this game, because they kind of take her love of food from the movie and make that her entire personality here. Like, there's even a mini game where she works at a hot dog cart, and I'm pretty sure every time her sprite is just standing there idle on screen, she pulls something out to eat, and I'm sure Galleria was having none of that. But when the group gets together, boy can they groove. Now, I'm not going to say these dance moves are the same ones they do in the movie, but you know, I won't really dox them for that. But something I will dox them for is their extreme overuse of 2000 slang in this game. It was almost hard to read at times because of how much they put in. Like, you can tell a bunch of old people came together and tried to make it dopalicious. And guys, I rewatched this movie, and sure, there is slang abound, but nowhere near as cringy as it is in this game. And if you were looking for any of the other characters from the movie in this game, well, keep looking, because they are nowhere to be found. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of other characters in this game, like Rebecca Rave, who runs the talent agency, Lindy Hop, who runs the dance studio, and don't forget DJ Ducats at WBOM Da Bomb. But their parents, not here. The musical jock rapper slash love interest, not here. Hell, they didn't even include that creeper Jackal Johnson, though maybe that's for the better. That guy always skeeved me out. But wrapping up the characters, I think I'll give this a 7. Transferred the main characters over rather well, but threw in a ton of filler characters to move the plot along in a similar way. Which, speaking of plot, this game really had me rethinking what I remembered the original plotline of the Cheetah Girls actually being. I wouldn't say the goals of the Cheetah Girls in both the game and the movie are that far off from each other, but they just happen in pretty different ways. Almost as if they're like different timelines of the Cheetah Girls. Because in the movie, the Cheetah Girls are trying to win their talent show and are scouted by a producer at a record label, which, long story short, the producer wants to change who they are. But they are the Cheetah Girls, goddammit, and everyone ends up hating each other, then loves each other in the end. But in the game, the Cheetah Girls are essentially seeking out becoming famous. They work gig after gig until they eventually make it to a singing competition in Spain, where the game then ends. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Because if you remember, the Cheetah Girls 2 actually takes place in Spain, so I'm thinking maybe you could consider the game an in-between between the original movie and the second movie. Like they've established themselves now and are working their way towards Spain. So that in mind, I decided to actually double check and sit down and watch the Cheetah Girls 2. And well guys, I cracked the code, because what happens in the game is not how they make it to Spain in the movie. In the movie, Chanel and her mom are going to Spain to visit Chanel's mom's boyfriend, but Galleria just wants to keep practicing all summer, which then brings them to apply to actually that same competition in Spain. So aha! Gotcha, Disney! They thought they could pull a fast one on us, but continuity error in the Cheetah Girls universe. Or the game isn't canon. Either way. And before I give it a score, something I did want to point out is that it could be argued that Toto, Galleria's dog, is actually the mastermind behind all the Cheetah Girls music in this world. Like, remember in the movie when Galleria is writing and practicing one of the Cheetah Girls songs, and then she sings it to Chanel on the phone and Toto starts to dance? Well, in the game, Toto actually barks some music notes, which then Galleria uses to write a song. So there you have it, record producer Toto right there. But giving this an accuracy score for storyline, I think I'm going to give it a 4. Again, it has some similarities, but it's just all done in a different way. And now moving on to Easter eggs, which I think is a perfect opportunity to talk about the music used in this game. But unfortunately, the only real Cheetah Girls song you'll hear is a retro game style version of Cheetah Sisters on the home screen. All the other music is just a generic hip-hoppy beat, and there aren't really many other Easter eggs other than that. All the locations are made up, and like we said earlier, the people are made up too. I mean, you could argue some connection to a moment when Toto runs off in the game like he does at the end of the first movie, but in the game, he doesn't fall into a manhole, he just gets lost and finds his way back to the radio station. So really, the best I can do for Easter eggs is give it a 2. And finally, is it a good game? Well, So really, this game is like a combination lifestyle game and Guitar Hero. Is it my type of game? No. Is it challenging? For the age demographic? Probably. Look, you're just pressing a bunch of buttons to a beat. Well, maybe that's my biggest gripe, is that oftentimes you would have to keep a rhythm in your head because the notes on screen would not match the beat of the music that's playing. But I would say that's like 85% of the game. Then another 5% would simply be walking to your next gig, another 5 dialing your cell phone, and another 5 was miscellaneous, very simple activities like picking an outfit or making a demo. But you know, the gameplay with the songs did get harder. There were a few times when I messed up so bad that I had to restart, so I could imagine that this would be challenging for a kid. And would I ever want to play this game again? Probably not, so I'll give it a 4. And this brings our total score for the Cheetah Girls to a 17, which is our lowest score yet, and to be honest, I'm disappointed. But let's switch it over by looking at the future by playing Phil the Future for the Game Boy Advance. Another TV show and game from my childhood that I remember very fondly, because as the channel name suggests, I'm a pretty big tech head, so any show that incorporated hypothetical futuristic technology automatically had my attention. But just as a refresher, Phil the Future follows Phil Diffie and his family from the year 2121 after their time machine breaks down in the year 2003. So they are essentially forced to acclimate to the 21st century. In the game, we have the same cast of characters here. Phil's family, including Phil himself, Lloyd, Barb, and Pim. Can't forget about their pet caveman Curtis, who is also playable in this game, as well as Keely and Vice Principal Hackett. And I would say the two characters that really have any sort of personality here are Keely and Curtis. Curtis, obviously, because he has to talk like a caveman, so all of his dialogue is different, and he kind of has this ape-like skill set, and Keely still has that super eager, friendly personality. Now, Phil's dialogue does make sense for him, but it's also just a little too plot-driven, and the same goes for his parents. And in terms of character style, just like we saw with the Cheetah Girls, you were playing as a sprite with the actual actor's picture being used for any dialogue. I do think the Cheetah Girls could take a couple notes from the design of this game, because I think the sprites here are honestly fantastic. They took a bit more of a cartoonish approach. Everyone has great expressions, the character styles are spot on, and overall you can just really tell who is who. Who? Whom? I don't know, whatever. And I'll have to call it out again when we get to the Easter egg section, but they even have a character in this game that was only ever in one episode, and to be honest, he is totally not needed, but nice touch. So for characters, I think I'm going to give it an 8. And alright, for storyline, it's made up. That doesn't mean it's going to get a 0, because this honestly could have happened in an episode of Phil the Future. I just hate it when these games completely ignore what is going on in the world that has already been created for them. But essentially, Pim and Andy Baxley release a bunch of creatures known as blahs throughout Pickford. The game describes them as pet rocks that are designed to eat stress, though I guess if they take too much stress, the individual will develop the whatevers, which is like having extreme disinterest and laziness. But Phil, Keely, and Curtis now set out to save the town from its chronic apathy. And to be honest, Phil is less worried about saving the individuals with the whatevers and more so worried about the fact that these weren't invented until the year 2089, and that someone might find out that his family is from the future. But obviously you go around capturing all these little guys and everything eventually ends up happity-doo-dah-day. Now, like I said, I don't think I can give this a 0 because it's definitely a plot line that could have been explored, and it also doesn't take away any lore from the show. So let's give it a 4. Now let's move on to Easter eggs. Like I mentioned earlier, I think it's a nice nod to the show having a guest star in the game. Because if you don't know who this is, it's Orlando Brown from That's So Raven. And I didn't mention it earlier, but they even throw in Keely's mom too, which is another great nod. Locations in the game are also from the show for the most part. Their house looks pretty similar. We go to their school, H.G. Wells. Hell, we even go to the local tomato farm like they do in an episode of the show. Now, most of the gadgets in this game, though, are mostly made up. We actually even started to sound like Doofenshmirtz after a while with all these made up names. But we do get mentions of the wizard, which, guys, let me tell you, the wizard might be the reason that I'm obsessed with technology. The thing looks so cool and it pretty much did everything. Anyway, lastly for this section, I do want to talk about this laser ball minigame that you get to play, because while I was playing it, it did seem very familiar. So I did a little research and it turns out that there's an episode where Lloyd tries to get Phil to play an episode of Laser Squash with him. So all in all, I will give it a 6. And gameplay. Honestly, it's a pretty good game. It's a classic side scroller. You get to play as Phil, Keely, and Curtis, and each of them have their own skill set. Phil, for example, uses a capturator to shoot at blahs and then suck them up. There's also different kinds of blahs, which makes for different kinds of difficulty while playing. And while most of the game is pretty straightforward, I did get stuck a few times, so much so that at one point I thought I was stuck in a glitch, eventually turning to walkthroughs to see where I went wrong. And as I asked with the Cheetah Girls, would I play this game again? And honestly, I probably would. Like, one more time. So I think I'll give this a 6, giving Phil of the Future a total score of 24, which actually puts it in second place in our accuracy rating, right behind Phineas and Ferb. And for our last game, I actually picked this up when we went to Video Games New York last time, and I could just not pass up this game. JONAS for the Nintendo DS. For $5, I might add. Quite the steal. Now, if you don't know, I actually am a pretty big Jonas Brothers fan. Maybe not so much their newest stuff, I just haven't listened to it, but I went to a Jonas Brothers concert a few years ago, and I know their first handful of albums pretty well. But that being said, I didn't really watch Jonas all that much. It was just kind of really cringy to watch, but I did suffer through this video game for you, so let's get into it. Starting up this game, you are greeted with BAM! The Jonas Brothers themselves. Joe, Nick, and Kevin. And to be honest, these renders are like creepily good. Like, you can easily tell it's them, but the longer you look at it, the more uncomfortable you get. And these renders would be great if they stayed that way, because as soon as you put them into 3D space on the DS, oof. But you also have the Jonas parents here, that little menace Frankie, their friend Stella, and the Jonas superfan Macy. They all have those same aspects, a really nice artwork for dialogues, and then this horrifyingly janky looking 3D model when playing. But you know, you can only do so much when trying to mimic real people with these graphics, so. But everyone's personalities also carry over here. Joe being the ridiculous one of the bunch, Nick just kind of going with the flow and being a heartthrob, and Kevin coming in with those dumb one-liners. And while we do get some songs, nothing else too extreme here to bring the characters to the next level. I think I'll give this a solid 7. As for storyline, another classic tie-in video game trope comes into play here, with each level being an episode of the show. For example, I played levels Keeping It Real and Groovy Movies, both of which gamify events of the episodes with the same title. And while the levels don't follow the episodes to a T, they do grow on Jonas lore and give you little extra moments that weren't necessarily in the show. Like Joe having to run across town to sneak the giant birthday card he made for his dad's fake birthday into his locker, or Frankie holding a yard sale selling his brother's old stuff right as they needed it to reenact the home videos they ruined, which the yard sale didn't happen in the show but totally could have. Or you have a whole level in the storage closet when they needed a disguise to leave Misa's pieces. Oh hey, I get it. Though the game definitely leans into their musical ability a bit hard if we were trying to be literal here. Like with any doors they're locked out of, they have to play a little ditty and it opens for them. I know it's adding more for gameplay reasons, but nothing like that ever happened in the show. So a short section, but pretty easy to decipher when the whole episode is literally right in front of you. 8. Now for Easter eggs. And there's a lot here. Like, we obviously have the iconic firehouse that they live in, even through to the bedroom, which looks pretty close to the show. In fact, all the locations are pretty spot on. I mean, I guess we never really see an overhead map of their town, but even still. And in the Groovy Movies level, you have to get the same costumes that they were wearing when they were making their home movies. You also get a deep dive into the Stellavator. And as for music, well, Jonas fans, you're in luck, because there is Jonas music galore in here. Not only do you get to play a Guitar Hero-like way at the end of every level to a new Jonas song, but the riffs I mentioned earlier to open the doors is also the opening notes to Live to Party, which is the opening theme. Now, their music isn't absolutely everywhere, like the general background music is some generic rock-type beat, but I listened to some of the background and scene transition music from the show, and honestly, they all kind of fall into a similar category. I'm just impressed that they were able to get actual Jonas songs in here. I mean, they are a little compressed, but much better than any music we've gotten for any game so far. Art design and music really holding things strong here, so I think I'll give it a 7. And now finally, gameplay. And I've got a bone to pick with the developers of this game, because I am left-handed, and they came so close to accommodating that, yet failed so miserably. So just to set the scene, this game uses the stylus to move your character around. Already infuriating to me. I'm just really not a fan of games that do that, but I can get over that, but only if the other game mechanics are good. And yeah, they're not great. One thing that had me yelling at my screen was every time I needed to move a box to jump on it. So you can just walk up to a box to jump onto it, but there's also a maneuver where you have to tap on it so you can hold onto it to move the box. But sometimes you just get so close to the box that you gotta go back and forth a few times to get yourself together. Other times you start moving the box, and the minute your stylus gets too close to the box, you let go and now you're on top of the box. Sorry to harp on boxes, but this is just such a big part of the game that I felt I needed to mention it. But now on to my lefty gripe. So again, those riffs that you use to open doors, you have to use the D-pad to point in a certain direction and use the stylus to strum the note. And guys, that's all on the same side. And a dumb lefty like me, I guess, can't do that with one hand. So every time this happened, which was quite often, I needed to remaneuver my hands and somehow strum with the right hand when I'm not right-handed. A lot of games will use the ABXY buttons to mimic the D-pad on the opposite side so that I can still use my left hand to strum, but they didn't do that. Well, actually, the thing is they did, but they also didn't really think it through. So anytime the arrows are pointing left, right, or up, it'll work. But anytime it was down, it would quit me out. Why? Because that is also where the B button is, which quits you out. And then when you actually play a song, they tell you you can use the ABXY buttons and it works fine. So Jonas developers, just take a step back and look at the mechanics a little bit more. It was seriously driving me crazy. Anyway, it's a 5 for me, which brings our total score for Jonas for the DS to a 27, beating out Phil the Future for second place in our rankings, though Phineas and Ferb still holds on to the lead for the most accurate Disney Channel video game we've looked at so far. These shows, movies, and games are always a great walk down memory lane for me, and I hope they are for you too. Again, be sure to check out the video from the last time we did this so that you stay up to date on all these rankings. And as always, thanks for watching. I have had the Cheetah Girls stuck in my head for the past week now.